$5 trillion infrastructure plan today.
Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes and the committee's ranking Democrat Adam Schiff butting heads over the fate of their rival memos on the Russia investigation.
We actually want the Democratic memo out. We think it's ridiculous on the face of it.
What's really going on here is the president doesn't want the public to see the underlying facts.
Here are some headlines of so-called mainstream press fawning over the sister of the dictator who murders people.
Washington Post, the Ivanka Trump of North Korea captivates people in the South at the Olympics.
A dreamer is now speaking out against Democrats, saying they don't have his back and he supports Trump.
President Trump is willing to work with Democrats, but at the end of the day, it's Democrats that don't want to work with him.
Figure skater Mirai Agasu becoming the first American woman to land a triple axel.
Wow.
That is not easy.
As you look up Avenue of the Americas, you see a lot of taillights there because folks are heading toward Central Park, going to work on this first.
Because it's a one-way street.
Right, that's true, too.
It all goes that way.
Right,
Goes
and
that
one
way.
way is right past our building. A lot of people are driving past, and if you are driving past, honk. Because we like the background noise.
I don't think we're going to hear
I
it.
don't think
Really?
about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk about the big story today. Is actually the big story from last week. Remember, the Republicans put out a four-page FISA abuse memo that essentially said all the problems with getting the FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page. Well, then the Democrats came out with a 10-pager that rebuts all of that stuff. There are, however, and we predicted this last week, there are apparently some sources and methods that reveal how our intel community works, in that the Democrats installed those, according to the President of the United States, who said yesterday, he tweeted out, called it political with the sources and methods. And the Democrats knew that when it landed on the president's desk, he would have to say, I can't sign this. I'm going to have to redact stuff. He didn't want to do that because he didn't want to look like he was editing their work.
Right. So this all happened within the House Intel Committee. You have the top guy, who is Devin Nunes. He did the Republican memo, and all the Democrats in that committee said, we don't want the Republican memo released. Then you have the top guy, the top Democrat, and that's Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff. And all the Republicans, the whole committee voted for that one to be released. So it goes to the president's desk. These two guys are at odds over who's right, who's wrong. And, you know, Devin Nunes over the weekend, he was on one of the Sunday shows, and he made a really good point. He said, if these Democrats, if they really want you to see it, then they would have spent the weekend redacting or fixing these redacting errors and making it so that you could see it. But then the Democrats, Adam Schiff was also on some of the Sunday shows, and he had his own response. He's blaming the Republicans.
It's so bad the staffs have actually been curtains between them. They're told not to interact with each other.
Really?
So let's listen.
We actually want the Democratic memo out. We think it's ridiculous on the face of it. We think it's very political about how they attack myself. They attack Chairman Gowdy. They turn Carter Page into some super secret Russian spy. They talk about how Christopher Steele is a really, really good source when we know that he lied to the FBI. So we want this out. We don't know why they're not in this weekend redacting it so that we can get it back to the White House so the president can declassify it.
The president doesn't want the public to see the underlying facts. What is revealed in our memo are quotations from the very FISA application that really demonstrate just how misleading the Republicans have been. But the president doesn't want you to see these facts from the FISA application because it completely undermines his claim of vindication.
We'll see.
That's not true.
There's nothing that Adam Schiff says that the president agrees with and vice versa. Dan Bongino looked at what the Democrats are doing. He says, tactically, you got to salute them.
For as much as I disagree with the Democrats and their ideology and everything they do in this case, which has been downright evil in the whole fabrication of the Russia narrative, you almost have to respect their deviousness. They're tactically brilliant. Put information in there that they know can't get out on sources and methods, in their memo, that is. Give it to the president, knowing he can't release that memo, and then come back and say immediately, as if on cue, oh, look, the president's hiding something. I mean, it's really deranged, but this is what they do.
But the president isn't hiding. He said he would sign it, provided, you know, the Department of Justice and the FBI both looked at the Democrats' version. They said, there are some things we got to take out. Democrats wouldn't do it over the weekend. Apparently, they're going to look at it today. There are a number of congressional Democrats, that is to say, who say we could release it as early as Monday or Tuesday, and then we'll all be able to see. And Inslee made a great point earlier. When the Republican memo came out, the Democrats said, absolutely not, we don't want that out. Whereas when the Democrat memo came out, everybody, Republicans and Democrats, got together. They wanted the transparency, but you got to take the secrets out of the darn.
Do y'all think that the Democrats are stalling to water it down? I heard that over the weekend, that they might be doing this to stall it, water it down, so that you at home, you forget about it, you don't care anymore when it is released.
I don't know. We're going to find out soon if they are stalling. Meanwhile, 5 minutes after the top of the hour, the other major thing that's going to happen, now that a 2-year budget's been basically agreed upon, now it's time to focus on the promise that Republicans made to Democrats and vice versa, that they were going to talk about the DACA situation and as it relates to immigration. If you want the DACA thing done for the kids that came here young and are now, for the most part, in their 20s, if you want to give them a pathway to citizenship, the president outlined what you need to get that done. He's going to want, if you want 1.8 million on a pathway in over 10 years or 12 years, then it's got to end chain migration. You got to stop the visa lottery system. You got to provide tens of millions for border security. And now it's going to be, as Mitch McConnell says, one of the first times in a long time, a freewheeling Senate debate on the pluses and minuses. And when they begin to congregate around one plan, this whole thing will begin to take shape, hopefully by March 6th.
I am really excited about this. I mean, we could be disappointed, but I hope this works out in a very
I'm
diplomatic
the optimist
way.
last hour. And
yes, I'm on board with you too, because Mitch McConnell is fulfilling his promise. He said, you know, Dems, if you give us a budget and you don't throw in DACA, we'll deal with immigration in the month of February. So now he's doing that, and he's coming to the floor of the Senate and he's saying, all right, here's a shell of a bill. Y'all fill it with what you want, and that's what they're doing. Normally, the majority party fills it with all kinds of stuff that they want because they know they're going to be able to get the votes. And that's not happening this time. So everyone can throw in what they like, and then they can debate it like old times.
That's right, like the olden days before. That's right. So
little miming.
Already, a number of very conservative Republicans in the Senate have come forward with a bill that essentially, and there they are right there, essentially mirrors exactly what the President of the United States would like to see. He would like to see the money for the wall. He would like to end chain migration as we know it, in the visa lottery system. But the high price that Democrats would pay then would be offset by the fact that the Republicans would then let in 1.8 million of the Dreamers. The people who are behind this say, look, this is ultimately the best deal for the Senate because this is the only one that will be signed by the president, but more importantly, passed by the House. Keep in mind, the House and the president both have veto power over whatever the Senate comes out with.
And the House is ticked. They did not like that budget bill. The Freedom Caucus is irate. And they say, we want the Goodlatte proposal pushed forward and thrown at the Senate. That's different from what we've been debating with Tom Cotton and others released over the weekend.
We had a fella who was brought into this country by his mother from Mexico when he was 1 year old. He is today living the American dream, even though technically he is not an American citizen. His name is Hilario Yanez. He works for a big Fortune 500 company down in Houston. He supports what the president is doing. And while, you know, traditional wisdom would be, oh, he clearly supports the Democrats, right? He doesn't, because he says they simply don't have a plan. Listen.
The president is taking leadership on this issue. You know, he's very compassionate on this issue. He understands it, and he's taken a lot of courage. He's willing to work, you know, and to get something done. I think it's necessary that we need border security. We need the security out there, the technology, the infrastructure. As far as the Democrats, I'm a little confused as what their message is. I'm a little confused as what they believe in. And so for me, it's more appealing to appeal to my values and something that aligns with those.
Well, you know, you think about it. If he's able to work out and do something, even the first step to some type of immigration reform, he'll do more than President Bush, President Clinton, as well as President Obama. He's got a 2-year budget, which a lot of people don't like what's in it. Some people do. Bottom line is for 2 years, we're not going to be debating the debt ceiling and shutting down the government once this thing is verified. And then if he gets this DACA deal on top of tax reform, as well as the judges and the Supreme Court justice, you see this huge tote board, a lot of check marks.
I just don't know that the Democrats in the Senate are going to give Donald Trump a win when it comes to DACA. Ultimately, you know, young people like Hilario there, ultimately, he would be able to say, you know, Barack Obama did not give me legal status, but Donald Trump did. That would be a big win for Republicans. And in election year, I just don't see.
You don't
them
think that could
helping
backfire, though? Because the DACA, everyone's smart. You see what's going on. These DACA recipients would say, listen, the president, just sign the deal.
Yeah.
That way we get to stay.
But see, Trump has made it very clear what he wants. He wants the three things for the one thing. I think the Democrats will say, we'll give you one thing, Mr. President, and he'll say, I don't want that. Keep in mind, when they were doing the budget deal, apparently Chuck Schumer offered him the $25 billion for the wall, which ultimately was what he wanted. But the president said, nope, not going to do it because I want more.
And plus, he wasn't guaranteeing it first. If they lose the House, he wouldn't have gotten it. Steve, conventional wisdom says you're right. The only thing different is they're screaming at Chuck Schumer's house in Brooklyn. They're interrupting Nancy Pelosi's speeches in San Francisco. They are feeling, the Democrats are feeling the heat. That might change their mind.
But then they can just say, in November, they can say, Donald Trump, you know, he wanted too much, couldn't go for it. I'm just not as optimistic. I hope something is done because it's a mess, but I just don't know politically if the Democrats are going to do it.
Somebody who's never a mess, Jillian Early.
Hey, Jillian.
That's hilarious.
Over the weekend, I heard from so many people. Jillian was so happy.
I was so happy. I know I'm paying it for it now. I've got like a sore throat and the cold, but I'm like, I don't even care because it was the Eagles Super Bowl parade, went skydiving. It was an awesome weekend, guys. Let's get you caught up.
Skydiving story we're going to air later in the week.
We will, yes. Let's get you caught up on some of your headlines right now, starting with the Fox News alert. We now know the victims of the fiery helicopter crash in the Grand Canyon, killing 3 people, injuring 4 others who are fighting for their lives in the hospital. All 6 passengers are from the United Kingdom, and the pilot, 42-year-old American Scott Booth, surviving but in critical condition. It's still unclear what caused the fatal crash that took off from Nevada. The NTSB is now investigating. If he survives, prosecutors want the death penalty for the man accused of killing 2 Ohio police officers, Quentin Smith, in the hospital after being shot by police. He's accused of ambushing Westerville officers Anthony Morelli and Eric Joring. We now know Smith wasn't even allowed to own a gun. The community remembering those fallen heroes with a prayer vigil overnight. Officer Morelli's cruiser turned into a memorial sitting outside City Hall. Extreme weather forcing Southwest Airlines to cancel hundreds of flights in Chicago because they ran out of de-icing fluid, leaving passengers furious.
This is Chicago. Hello. It snows here all the time. It's icy here all the time. How could he run out of de-icer in Chicago? I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, Steve literally had the same exact reaction. The airline hoping to resume close to normal operations today at Midway International Airport. Chicago is digging out from the biggest snowstorm of the year. Let's look at your headlines. I heard you say, Steve, how is that possible?
I know. They could always get out a scraper.
No, I agree with that guy. I mean, listen, it's not just people going on vacation. Some people are trying to get home for funerals or get home for weddings.
Absolutely.
That changes lives. That is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Who did not order the de-icing stuff?
Oopsie daisy.
Someone's in trouble.
They are. All right, Jillian, thank you. Meanwhile, a memo, a criminal referral from Senators Graham and Grassley claims to back up the surveillance abuse claims made in the Devin Nunes memo. So why is the media ignoring it? Andrew McCarthy has an idea. He's going to join us next.
And Hillary Clinton is still trying to figure out what happened in 2016. But guess who has an idea? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. 3 names, 1 woman.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. What doesn't kill you makes it fire. What's that fever?
I will say this in terms of the Grassley memorandum or the Grassley letter. It is part of the same effort, along with the chairman of our committee, to try to put the FBI and Bob Mueller's investigation on trial. It is a well-known defense tactic.
Really? Well, the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee, Adam Schiff, claiming that the release of the Grassley-Graham memo, a criminal referral, was simply to try and undermine the Mueller-Russia investigation. But can he back that up?
Here to weigh in is former assistant U.S. attorney and National Review contributing editor Andrew McCarthy. Andrew, he didn't mention anything with Grassley and Graham about Mueller. Why is he saying that?
Well, because that's the theme that they want to put out. They're obviously unhappy and a little bit embarrassed by some of the things that are being revealed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like every time there's a piece of good news for Trump, they float out some story that he's about to fire Mueller, he's going to fire Rosenstein, he's going to fire everybody. This is just what they do.
Ultimately, what the Graham-Grassley criminal referral memo, what it does is it verifies much of what was in Devin Nunes's memo that was released about 10 days ago, Andy. But then you look at the Christopher Steele dossier. Ultimately, the Nunes memo has been verified 1,000 times, you write in National Review Online, 1,000 times more than the Steele dossier.
Yeah, well, see, this is the big problem. We spent a lot of time talking about Steele's credibility, and it's certainly worth doing that because it certainly appears that the Justice Department and the FBI concealed major parts of his bias. You know, simply the fact that he was working for the opposition campaign is something that clearly should have been disclosed. But that's not the principal problem with his work product. The principal problem with the dossier is that courts don't care what the investigative agent's credibility is. What they want to know is the sources of the factual information that you're asking me, the judge, to grant a warrant based on, to say that there's probable cause based on. I need to know that those sources are believable. You got to give me something that tells me why I should credit them. And the real problem with the dossier is that the sources are these anonymous Russians who are often 3, 4, 5 steps removed in terms of hearsay from the things they claim to have seen. And then you overlay that with the problem that Steele himself hasn't been in Russia in 20 years. You know, he knows people who know people who know people. Right. So this thing is just sort of a multiple hearsay, anonymous document that's really rank rumor that can't be verified.
I just want to see the transcripts of the the documents that went on with those 4 visits to the FISA court. We have to see them, or else we're going to be debating this circuitously forever. Lastly, in your column, you say out of all the text messages, we're focusing on the wrong thing between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. What do you mean?
Well, I think that in general, what we need to focus on here is the information that was put in front of the court, which is it's not verifiable and it's not credible. As far as the agents are concerned, if you get to the point where you reject the underlying information because it's not credible, then you have to get into the business of what was going through the minds of the investigators.
Right. Okay.
And it looks here like what's going through the minds of the investigators.
Sure.
They decided that Trump was not suitable to be president,
Gotcha.
and they allowed their political convictions to interfere with their professional duties.
You wrote a great op-ed in National Review Online. Andy McCarthy, thank you very much. We've got some quick headlines for you on this Monday morning. Tensions flaring in the Middle East. Israel and Syria could be one step closer to war. The Jerusalem Post reporting today, Israel has now deployed an anti-missile system to the Syrian border. This comes after a full weekend of conflict, which started with when an Israeli helicopter took out an Iranian drone launched from Syria. An Israeli fighter jet was then shot down, sparking a massive air attack on several Syrian and Iranian targets in the country of Syria. And an al-Qaeda terrorist is living like a king in Gitmo, eating Oreos and watching TV, it is reported. Ahmed al-Darbi scoring the sweet deal in exchange for snitching on fellow terrorists. His brother-in-law crashed a plane in the Pentagon on September the 11th. Darbi is scheduled to return to Saudi Arabia this month under an Obama-era plea agreement that will get him out of Gitmo. All right, Ainsley.
Thank you, Steve. President Trump vowing to fight the opioid crisis plaguing our nation. Listen.
America will not overcome this epidemic overnight, but just like Americans always will, I do think we have to change our ways, and we will, but we will prevail. We're going to beat it. We're going to get tough. We're going to get angry, and we're going to win.
Our next guest knows the reality of this epidemic all too well. Her name is Sue Kruzik. She lost her son, Nick, to an opioid addiction. And this Valentine's Day, she is sending a letter to the president, putting a name and a face to this crisis. And she writes, quote, Nick's addiction became noticeable and began to bear its ugly head. Nick came to us and revealed that he had a drug problem and needed to go to rehab. He was addicted to opiates, and I had to Google what an opiate was. And she joins us now. Sue, first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. I cannot imagine. I'm a mother, too. You're a mother to 3 children, and you lost Nick 4 years ago when he was 20 years old. What happened?
So, Nick was struggling for a few years. It turns out he was a starting center on his varsity hockey team as a freshman.
Lots of pressure.
Lots of pressure. And even though he was very talented, coming off the number 6 team in the nation at that point.
He's a big deal.
He was a big deal. And right before his very first game, an upperclassman tossed him a little white pill and told him it would help him relax. And Nick took it and apparently liked the way it made him feel, because he later told us that he never played a high school game sober.
Wow,
Yeah.
that upperclassman just said this will make you feel better, and it did, and one thing led to another. And then what happened later? He went to college, was playing hockey, and still was taking these opioids?
So Nick did. He went on and graduated high school, started college, I should say, and yes, he was playing hockey at that time. And it was during that time where Nick came to us and said he needed to go to rehab. And we were like, rehab? You know, for what? Opiates. And yes, I was, I had no idea what an opiate was and had to Google it, and off to rehab Nick went.
Look at these pictures. I mean, you're the all-American family. This can happen to anyone. I mean, braces, we saw pictures of him with braces and kids in the background with sippy cups. I mean, we can all relate to these pictures, and it can happen to anyone. So you wrote a letter to the president for Valentine's Day. Why did you want it to be delivered as a Valentine?
Well, we all kind of came together as a nation, and figured Valentine's was very fitting.
These are moms that have lost their kids, right?
Yes, and perhaps some fathers too jumped in. And through our broken hearts, we wanted to show the president our love and warm his hearts through our tragedy and see the faces. And, a lot of it is all about numbers with this epidemic. And, these are our babies.
I know, these are all children. They're someone's kids.
Yes.
174 people died every single day in 2016 in our country. All right, would you read what you wrote the president, an excerpt of that letter?
Yes. I can walk away the lucky one, though. I was privileged to be Nick's mom for 20 years. And I got to hear, I love you, Mom, every single day.
The tears. My gosh, I can't even control myself.
I told myself I wasn't going to cry.
Well, you have every right to. I don't know how you're even sitting here, and we just applaud you for that, because you're trying to tell other families that this doesn't have to happen to you. What do you recommend? What's your message to the president? What's your message to families that have kids that are addicted?
I'm just begging and pleading for help. This is the biggest epidemic our nation has ever faced. And, it's now, we know that addiction is a disease. It's, it's not a moral dilemma. It is a fact. And this is the only disease that I know of that is not being handled and treated appropriately as one.
Were you pleased with the president giving $3 billion for each year for the next 2 years to fight this, and what he said in the State of the Union address?
Yes. So I'm first of all, I'm pleased, and I thank him tremendously for acknowledging and addressing this epidemic. And now, yes, certainly, putting the funding out there, and it's a start. It's a great start. And I know that this is only the beginning of the great and big things that he's going to do to pull us out of this.
Thank you so much, Sue. You'll have to come back and keep us informed with how things are going with all these other parents that are facing this too. Is there a website? that your organization has put together?
Well, it's not my organization with the letters. Is that what you're talking about? No, a wonderful woman in Massachusetts. It was her idea to, fled.
To write the letters. All right, well, if you start an organization for this, and I think that might be necessary at this point, then let us know and come back. We wish you all the best.
Thank you
bless
so
you
much.
and your 2 children at home.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley coming up next.
This is a president who puts his own personal interest above the national security interests of the country. Now, they claimed when they released the Republican memo that this was in the interest of full transparency, and all the White House people were saying full transparency. Well, apparently full transparency only goes so far.
Let's bring in Hogan Gidley. He's the Deputy White House Press Secretary. He joins us from our nation's capital. He's on the North Lawn. Hogan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's hard to smile when you hear things like that, but I'm going to start off the day with a smile for you guys.
Well, the Democrats are saying you guys have got a lot to hide because you don't want this out there because, despite what the president said regarding the Nunes memo, which vindicates him, this one does not.
Absolutely untrue. Adam Schiff knows this, and he knows it well. Let's talk about the hypocrisy from the left on this particular issue. They refused to say, at the beginning, at the outset, they made the very clear point that anything released from this memo would be devastating to national security. Republicans could not do it. And then when it came out, they said, oh, you have to release our memo. Well, which is it? Is it hurting national security or isn't it? And then also they voted against the release of the Republican memo. It was a vote along party lines. The Republicans voted unanimously to release the Democrat memo. So it's very clear who's playing politics with people's lives. But this president refuses to put people's lives at risk and play politics with national security, and that's what the Democrats are doing here. The president released the first memo. He declassified it because it did not reveal sources and methods. This report from the Democrats does not keep American lives safe. What it does is it reveals serious national security information that could, quite frankly, put our lives at risk, and the president is not going to do that.
Hogan, immigration debate hits Capitol Hill today, starting in the Senate. They're opening this up on the floor. What can we expect, and will we see a deal?
Hopefully so. Look, I mean, the president has been very clear about where he stands. You've had some incredible stories on this morning. Someone who is a DACA recipient who now supports the president because this president is the only one who's being sincere in trying to fix and find a long-lasting solution for the DACA problem. This president has come into office and in just a year's time has tackled some issues that have been dogging this country for the better part of 40 years. The immigration system is broken. This president knows it. It is so dangerous for the American people to have all these loopholes in the immigration system that allow people like members of the MS-13 gang to come through. Loopholes that we can't allow people to come here, but then we can't get them out. We have to allow our border security agents the means and methods to keep our country safe. The Democrats do not do that. This president will.
Senator Tom Cotton released a plan Sunday. We have it officially out today. A group of Republicans say build off your big four and have an additional framework. Has the president looked at it? Did they bounce it off the White House first? And what is his take if so?
Well, look, it's a very encouraging start to the day because everything in the president's framework is laid out in this bill. And it's not just a lasting solution for DACA. It is the things you mentioned. You have to build a wall. And the secret is walls work. Whether you're looking at the 2.5 decades of the wall at San Diego that reduced border crossings by 95%, the one in Jerusalem that reduced border crossings by 99%, the wall works. But you also have to end chain migration. You have to end the visa lottery. And you have to close those loopholes and give those Border Patrol agents the means and methods necessary to protect this nation. That's what the president's going to do, and that's what the Senate Republicans have in their bill.
So ultimately, it's up to the Senate to figure out what they can get to 60 votes with. If their plan, Hogan, does not have the 4 pillars that the president is behind, would he still sign it?
Well, that's a hypothetical, but I will say the president has been very clear. What he wants are those 4 pillars, and something short of that, I doubt will reach the president's desk and see the pen for signature.
Okay. Hogan, I would bring you to a report in Sunday's Axios. Jonathan Swan, who I think is extremely fair, says this. President Trump is defending Rob Porter and publicly, but privately, he says he's guilty. He says the president's told multiple people that he believes the accusations against Porter are true and finds him sick. 4 sources have spoken directly with President Trump and tell him his private comments about the ex-aide, whose 2 ex-wives accused him of violent attacks, have been brutal. So the president is just as outraged as many Americans about the alleged domestic abuse, which looks pretty strong, the evidence strong against Porter. Why won't he say that publicly, or do you think Jonathan Swan is wrong?
Well, I don't know if he's going to say that publicly or not, and I've not spoken with the president about this, but I can say, we lean on a process here at the White House, and quite frankly, as soon as we found out about this on Tuesday, by Wednesday, Rob Porter was gone. The president has been very clear that all forms of abuse, all forms of battery against women,
but he hasn't said
deplorable
that.
And disgusting. Right, but he hasn't. You haven't talked to him today. I mean, obviously, he said that multiple times in the past, but in this particular instance, you're talking about sources that I can't verify because I've not had that conversation with them.
Right.
But I know for a fact I've talked to the president about issues surrounding this type of behavior, and he finds it disgusting.
Sure. Well, the abuse allegations, the stories are horrific. They're bad stories. But something else that is just as troubling is apparently Mr. Porter did not ultimately have his security clearance because of the problems in his past. Is the White House going through everybody at the White House so close to the president, making sure, okay, this guy's got it, wait a minute, this person doesn't, maybe that person should not be so close to the president?
Well, look, that's a process, as I mentioned before, but it's a process done by career officials in the federal government, at the FBI and other agencies. So on purpose, for administration after administration, whether it was Bill Clinton, whether it was George W. Bush, whether it was Barack Obama, the White House doesn't interfere in those processes, and they keep going forward because we can't have a handle in that. That's something for outside entities to look at,
Hogan,
because you can't stop the process.
Will you and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, will y'all get together and maybe advise him and talk to him about this is an opportunity when he can come out against domestic violence? I mean, those pictures are horrific.
They were, absolutely. But the president has been out against domestic violence for a long time. He didn't, in the Oval Office, the thing you're probably talking about, he was asked specifically about Rob Porter. The president deplores, it thinks that domestic violence is grotesque. He said that on multiple occasions, and there's no place for it in this country. There's no place for it in this White House, and the president won't stand for it.
All right. Hogan Gidley joining us from the North Lawn of the White House, where we could tell it was a little breezy during that interview. Hogan, thank you.
And rainy.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Hogan. All right, let's hand it over to Jill. You know, have some more headlines for us.
That's right. Good morning to you guys. Let's get you caught up on a couple of quick headlines here, starting with this one. The Mexican woman is rescued after plunging off a 20-foot cliff while crossing into the U.S. illegally. Border Patrol spotting her boyfriend looking for help near Ocotillo, California. The 22-year-old airlifted from the scene, suffering from a fractured spine. Now, this photo that you're seeing showing just how rough the terrain is in that area. The 44-year-old man was detained. The woman will be sent back to Mexico once she's out of the hospital. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg now doubling down on comments she made last year. The justice said she had no doubt sexism played a major part in Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential loss. Well, now at a discussion at Columbia University, she was asked to clarify those comments.
I think it was difficult for Hillary Clinton to get by even the macho atmosphere prevailing during that campaign.
The 84-year-old adding anyone who watched the campaign unfold would have said the same thing. It is 7:42 on the East Coast. Let's go outside to Janice Dean, where it's a pretty warm start out there, Janice.
Not bad, I have to say. Where are you from? What are your names? Where are you from?
My name's Becky. I'm from Hilliard, Ohio, outside Columbus.
Pete. Together.
Pete from Columbus as well.
And?
Kay from Blue Ridge, Georgia.
Chris from Blue Ridge, Georgia.
What are you here in New York for?
The Westminster Dog Show.
Yes, I am going today. I can't wait. Let's take a look at the maps real quick, and we will talk about dogs, of course, throughout the day today and tomorrow. The Westminster Dog Show is here in New York City. Let's take a look at those maps because it's actually warm, relatively speaking, here in New York City. Are we looking at maps? Are we going to look at the maps? Are the maps coming up? Or are we just looking at these beautiful faces here? We're just looking at these beautiful faces. Enjoy New York City. Do you want to say hi to Steve, Ainsley, and Brian on the couch?
Hey, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll get it to
They
Twitter
should have
at
brought
some
the
point.
maps. If you're going to come visit Janice, bring a map.
Right, people don't have maps
Okay.
anymore.
Well, then
Okay.
don't
There's an
come.
app instead of a map.
Right.
You're right.
Pack it in your, take it on the plane, those long, big maps.
Hagstrom and Nancy Pelosi has been one of the most powerful Democrats in Congress for decades. But is that all about to change at 77 years old?
Plus, this flu season on track to be the worst ever.